On average, about 6.3 million animals enter adoption centers each year, mostly as strays or surrenders. The centers they end up in can be divided into two distinct categories: privately owned and municipally owned. Private animal adoption centers are owned and operated by individuals, while municipal animal adoption centers are owned and operated by the government. Both types of facilities have their benefits and challenges, which end up impacting their ability to care for animals in need. Take, for instance, Feral Cat Rescue. As a privately owned animal rescue facility, Feral Cat Rescue is a nonprofit entity funded primarily by donations.
We're Feral Cat Rescue, and we're a 501c3, which means that donations are tax deductible, and the cats live in our private foster homes, and then we bring them to Petco on Saturday, many cats, not all of them, of course, on Saturdays and Sundays so that they can get adopted.
We usually break even, so we don't have a lot of excess, but I think that's pretty typical for a nonprofit. We do and will apply for grants in the future.
I'm getting ready to work on a grant. I'm hoping to get a whole bunch of money for spay-neuter.
On the other hand, you have St. Mary's Animal Adoption and Resource Center. As the name suggests, this establishment is owned by the St. Mary's County government and funded by taxpayer dollars.
For the past 40-some years, Tri-County Animal Shelter was the only shelter in Charles, St. Mary's, and Calvert County. The facility is extremely old and dilapidated. They made an executive decision several years back to break off and start their own shelter, so there would be one centralized location for each of the counties instead of having a combined shelter. Linda Kelly opened first, we followed, and Charles County will be opening their facility in the future.
These different sources of funding come with their own unique drawbacks. Privately owned adoption centers are often at the mercy of the community for consistent income. This means that the stability of these entities are heavily influenced by the public's willingness to spend. During extreme crises like the COVID-19 pandemic, private adoption centers are hit the hardest.
COVID was very difficult for us as a nonprofit, not being able to go into a store and physically talk to people, for people to physically see our cats. That's mostly how we can get cats adopted, is people seeing them and hands-on meeting them. So it was all online, Facebook and Instagram, and that's the way we had to do it. It was very difficult. I, at one point, had 12 cats in my house. Every room was full of cats.
On the other hand, municipally owned adoption centers receive government funding and tend to facilitate animal control. This consistent source of income, combined with the ever-present need for animal control services, is generally able to stave off the threat of closure in these types of situations. That being said, while government funding has its benefits, it isn't without its own drawbacks. Consistent funding is unfortunately accompanied by purchasing restrictions and lengthy approval periods for said purchases.
So we can't just purchase from anywhere. We have to follow the guidelines and the policies through the county government. The procurement process is cumbersome, and depending on the situation, sometimes a need arises and it comes out of nowhere. It's not something that can wait a couple of weeks.
Being a privately owned establishment, Feral Cat Rescue, as the name suggests, has the luxury of being able to choose the animals it takes in. It only handles feral cats in the St. Mary's County area. On the other hand, municipal adoption centers don't get to pick and choose.
We carry everything. This is an open intake facility, so we don't discriminate on what walks through the door. I currently have a ball python in my office. He stays there because we have a few employees that are slightly afraid of snakes. He's also not, there's a lot of people who are afraid of snakes, so we don't put him up on the front counter where he's going to terrify everybody. We do have guinea pigs, we have rabbits, we have turtles, you name it, anything that walks through the doors. We also have Rosie the pig. And we also, of course, do dogs, cats, puppies, kittens. Our first month was extremely overwhelming. I think we received approximately 250 animals. And we have maintained between 120 and 130 animals. That's with intake and adoptions and transfers.
Animal housing is another facet that differs between the two types of establishments.
For any given foster, I would say that they would take in one batch of cats at a time, maybe once a month. And then it would, usually when we take in the cats, they're from feral colonies. That's how we get the majority of our adoptable cats.
You know, usually the amount of time is a couple months, but it can be a really long time. So it's almost scary to me when I take in an adult that may be difficult to find a home for. I think to myself, how long am I going to have this cat in my home?
While the feral cat rescue volunteers use their own homes to house and care for their animals, St. Mary's operates from a brand new 13,000 square foot, $6.8 million facility. This facility contains separate housing for cats, dogs, small mammals, farm animals, an infirmary, a specific kitchen dedicated to animal food prep, and much more. One challenge specific to municipal adoption centers deals directly with their relationship to animal control, a problem no one ever thinks is lurking in the area: animal hoarding.
So the first hoarding situation we had was 22 rabbits. The second situation was almost 50 cats. And the last situation that we just recently took in was 77 dogs. We put out a plea for help with our coalition partners, and everyone stepped up and took a few here and a few there, and it ended up working out that we were able to place 62 dogs in 72 hours, thanks to our coalition partners. And the rest we were able to put up for adoption and get adopted out pretty quickly as well.
On top of that, municipal adoption centers also handle the legal side of animal issues, taking in pets that were abused, neglected, and otherwise unsafe in their prior living situations. A challenge specific to private adoption centers is outreach. While municipal adoption centers can be found by simply going to the county government website and searching up the term adoption, private adoption centers have to market and establish relationships with other companies all on their own. In handling all of these challenges, both Feral Cat Rescue and St. Mary's Adoption Center have been able to foster incredibly giving and supportive communities individually.
We have built a wonderful village of different organizations that support us. They help us when we need it. They're always a phone call away. If we are overrun with animals, we have places that we call, and they never hesitate to jump in and help us out. And that has been a complete blessing. It's one of the major reasons we do what we do.
I mean, I don't want to say that I almost said we're fortunate, but we are fortunate. People donate a lot, and we've been able to get grants.
Anytime we are running low on supplies, if we reach out to the community and let them know, we get massive donations almost the next day.
There's one woman that adopted that cat that I had for 3 years. She'll just come in and hand me $1,000 cash once a year and say, here, I'm bringing this donation. I feel the community appreciates us and will bring in bags of cat food.
Our rescue organizations, our coalition partners, if we're running low on space or we have a sensitive case that needs to be assisted with, like we have an issue with a medical emergency, they have never failed to step in.
Given all the drawbacks and issues related to private adoption centers, Feral Cats Rescue's choice for their greatest challenge came as a surprise.
The biggest challenge for me is mean people, I think. I enjoy being at home and being with the animals and working with the animals. And it's, you know, it's like anything in life. Most people are really nice and fine, and most people are appreciative.
On the opposite end, St. Mary's Animal Adoption and Resource Center stated their greatest challenge is something both private and municipal adoption centers struggle with.
Our greatest challenge is finding veterinary care. There's a national shortage of veterinarians. Low-cost spay and neuter clinics are few and far between. And unfortunately, the shelters typically don't have a budget that allows them to pay private practice spay and neuter fees.
Feral Cat Rescue also has its own struggles with affordability and accessibility of veterinarian care.
We use Calvert Well Pet in Calvert County, and they're a nonprofit clinic, and it's like 54 miles round trip from my house, but I have been driving there every Friday for years and years.
It costs us roughly $100 to vet each cat per cat. So you can imagine that adds up very quickly.
But how do the people actually adopting these animals view private and municipal animal adoption centers?
So we adopted Apollo from the new St. Mary's Animal Adoption and Rescue Center probably 4 or 5 weeks after they opened. Such a little snuggler. That's what he really likes. He thinks he's a lap dog and a puppy still, even though he is really the size of neither.
So Delta was adopted in right around Thanksgiving, a little bit before Thanksgiving. She was taken to a vet, I'm not sure which one, to have the leg amputated. The people never picked her up. So she went to the animal shelter, and from there, that's where I adopted her.
We adopted Hippo in October of last year. I first saw his picture at the county fair. Loved the picture. He's adorable. Asked a couple questions about him, found out he was probably a hospice dog, and that was deterring a lot of people from adopting him, even though he's a sweetheart. But we decided to go and meet him, and then we fell in love with him and took a chance and adopted him. He's so derpy. He's a love bug, though. For everything he's been through in life, he's a major love bug.
The St. Mary's, I've been very pleased with them. They, they did give me information when I adopted Delta, but I felt like the follow-up that I received from St. Mary's was really good.
It's been wonderful, especially the new shelter. Very, very easy to work with, very accommodating. It took about 2 weeks before we could actually adopt Hippo because he had some vet issues and stuff going on. They let us visit him several times. Very, very sweet people, very accommodating.
What I loved, especially with adopting him, was that we walked in, fell in love in 2.5 seconds with him. And then I think it took a week for them to do all of the behind the scenes, like sanity checks that our house was okay for him before we could take him home. So it was great. It was really easy.
Despite all the differences between private and municipal animal adoption centers, what matters most to the adopters at the end of the day is they get to give their pets a forever home, no matter where they came from.